$1 million.
I'll pay you $1 million to pretend to be my wife for one night. The words hit Ilara like ice water. But it was what came next that changed everything. And if anyone finds out the truth, Ansel Harrington added, his voice dropping to something raw and desperate, we both lose everything. She stood frozen in the doorway of the executive office, 47 floors above Manhattan, watching her billionaire boss fall apart in slow motion. His perfect suit was wrinkled, his hands were shaking, and for the first time in 3 years, she saw something in his eyes that $12 billion couldn't buy: fear. But there was something else too, something he wasn't saying. The way his gaze kept darting to his phone, the envelope on his desk with a lawyer's letterhead, the faint tremor in his jaw when he said the word everything. Ansel, what's really, please? The word cracked like breaking glass. The board meeting is in 3 days. If I can't prove I'm more than what they think I am, I lose the company, my father's legacy, the only thing that proves I'm not. He stopped. That I'm not exactly what my ex-fiancée told the world I am. Her phone slipped from her fingers and clattered on the marble floor. She'd answered his midnight call thinking it was about the Tokyo merger. Instead, she'd walked into something far more dangerous. Because pinned beneath his laptop was a tabloid headline that made her blood run cold. Victoria's Tell-All, Part 2 drops Monday. The secrets he's still hiding. 3 years of perfect boundaries. 3 years of being invisible, indispensable, and absolutely untouchable. Now he wanted her to walk into a ballroom wearing a wedding ring that meant nothing and everything at once. One night, he said, stepping closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, bergamot and desperation. 8 hours. We convince the board. We survive whatever Victoria's planning, and by Monday morning, everything goes back to normal. But here's the thing about lies. They never stay contained when someone's actively trying to expose them. What Ansel wasn't telling her was that Victoria had receipts. Photos, audio recordings, proof that his first engagement was as calculated as a hostile takeover. And if the board discovered he was faking another relationship, the investigation alone would destroy him. What's Victoria threatening to release? Ilara asked quietly. He reached for the envelope, slid out a single page and handed it over. She read it twice. Her hands started shaking. It wasn't just an exposé. It was an accusation of fraud and manipulation, using fabricated relationships to influence stock prices and investor confidence. Yes, she whispered, not because of the money, but because if she didn't help him, the investigation would destroy him before the truth even mattered. Yes, but we do this my way, my terms. And you tell me everything. No more secrets. This is Mr. Duskmore. And if you've ever wondered what happens when protecting someone becomes the same thing as falling for them, you're exactly where you need to be. Hit subscribe. You're going to want to see how this ends. Drop a comment right now. Would you have said yes? Because this story is about to show you exactly what that yes costs. To understand why Ansel Harrington was willing to risk everything on a lie, you need to know what truth had already cost him. Cedar Rapids, Iowa. His father died at 53. Heart attack in the meatpacking plant break room. His mother found out via a phone call during her night shift cleaning office buildings. The funeral cost more than they had. Ansel was 19. He built Wraith Core on a single promise. Money would never control him again. 15 years later, he had $12 billion and 0 relationships that weren't transactional. Victoria had been the exception. Their engagement lasted 14 months, long enough for her to record private conversations, long enough to realize he'd scheduled their proposal between quarterly earnings and a board retreat. She called him a human calculator, incapable of genuine feeling. Then she sold that story and tanked his stock price by 8%. But that was just her opening move. Show me everything, Ilara said, setting down the fraud accusation. Ansel walked her through Victoria's evidence. Every date night is cross-referenced with merger timelines. Every gift is tied to stock movements. Did you love her? Ilara asked. Silence stretched between them. I don't know if I've ever felt anything that didn't serve a purpose. He turned his screen toward her. A new email from Victoria, Part 2 drops Monday, this time with receipts. Hope your new wife is better at acting than I was. She knows you're planning something, Ilara said. Worse. He showed her security footage. A woman delivering an envelope to his building lobby 3 hours earlier. Inside was a photograph of Ansel and Ilara taken last month outside the office, his hand on her shoulder steadying her on icy steps. Her face turned toward him, mid-laugh. The moment had been nothing, but the photograph looked intimate. Across the bottom, handwritten in red ink, I know who you're going to use. It won't work. V. Ilara's hands trembled. Victoria was already watching them. To understand why that terrified her, you need to know what visibility had cost her before. She grew up in her Aunt Marie's house in Brooklyn, 3 bedrooms holding 7 people. Her aunt never turned anyone away. The house smelled like fresh bread and sacrifice. Ilara escaped through night classes and relentless competence. Then she met someone who changed everything. 3 years of being his foundation while he found himself. When he left, his parting words were, "You feel more like a business partner than a girlfriend." She'd promised herself, never disappear into someone else's story again. Now Ansel was asking exactly that. The Hollander deal closes in 90 days, he explained. But James Hollander wants someone who values legacy over profit. He's invited us to Thursday's charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. His assistant moved the meeting up. His phone buzzed. A text, board meeting Friday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Be ready, Thompson. Thompson. The board member pushing for Ansel's removal. We have 48 hours, Ilara whispered. Why not hire someone? She pressed. Victoria's lawyers sent warnings to every firm. Anyone participating would be named as co-conspirators. So you need someone she can't threaten legally. Someone I actually trust. He moved closer. I don't want to pretend with a stranger. I'm already pretending every day. What are you actually afraid of? She asked. The real answer. I'm afraid I'm exactly what Victoria says I am. A man so broken he can only understand relationships as transactions. His voice cracked. I'm afraid my father died for nothing. The confession cracked something in her chest. 3 months, she said firmly. 3 million in installments, separate bedrooms, a documented backstory. And you start therapy. Done. The moment you treat me like an asset instead of a partner, I walk. He extended his hand. She took it. His palm was warm, slightly rough. The handshake lasted a beat too long. 48 hours, he said softly. Think you can become my wife by then? The question is whether you can become someone worth being married to. As she left at 2 a.m., she didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street. But Ansel did. His phone buzzed. She's lovely. I hope she understands what she's agreeing to. Thompson. The board wasn't just watching. They were hunting. Wednesday afternoon. Ansel's office had transformed into a rehearsal space for the most important performance of their lives. We met at a charity auction, Ilara said, pacing while he took notes like it was a merger negotiation. 18 months ago. You bid on a painting I wanted. I don't know anything about art. You do now. You bought it for our first anniversary. Where was our first date? Le Bernardin. Private room. You ordered for both of us without asking, typical, but got everything right. How did I know what you'd like? She stopped pacing. Because you'd been watching me for months. My coffee preference. The way I choose tables facing doorways. Silver jewelry over gold. He had been watching. He did know these things. Our first argument? He asked. Voice rougher now. You tried to buy my aunt a house without consulting me. We didn't speak for 3 days, until you showed up with food from that restaurant I mentioned once, the one with the blue awning on Amsterdam Avenue. You remember that? I remember everything you tell me. Thursday evening. The Metropolitan Museum blazed with light and expectation. Ilara stood in the hotel suite, staring at herself in the mirror. The midnight blue gown had appeared at her apartment yesterday with a note. This seemed right. She opened the door, and time stuttered. Ansel looked at her like he was discovering color for the first time. You look like your wife, she supplied. Like yourself, just more. In the elevator, he offered his arm. His hand was steady. Hers wasn't. Remember, she murmured. We're happily married. Comfortable. In love, he finished. The elevator doors opened before she could ask if he was still talking about the performance. They moved through the ballroom like dancers who'd rehearsed for years. Darling, Elara said as they approached the Hollander family, you promised to tell James about the Sustainable Supply Chain Initiative. James Hollander watched them with calculating eyes. So this is the woman who tamed the ice architect. Tamed is overstating it. Elara laughed, her real laugh. I prefer mutually beneficial partnership. Margaret Hollander clapped her hands. She's perfect for you. She speaks your language, but makes it sound human. Across the room, Elara noticed Thompson watching them intently, taking notes on his phone. He's documenting everything, she murmured. That's why we need to be flawless. Richard Cromwell had been drinking since 6. By 9, he was ready to draw blood. The robot finally bought himself a wife, he announced loudly. Tell me, sweetheart, does he schedule your intimate moments? Ansel's hand tightened on his champagne flute until the crystal creaked. Elara stepped forward, fingers brushing his wrist. He stilled instantly. You know what I love about my husband? He reads people like you read balance sheets. Right now, he knows you're over-leveraged in real estate, hemorrhaging money on that Miami development, and desperately hoping he'll bail you out. She smiled, but he won't, because cruelty is inefficient. She turned to Ansel. Dance with me. As they moved onto the floor, she said, they see the walls. I see the man who memorized my coffee order and remembers my aunt's birthday. He pulled her closer. When did I give you my jacket? 3 minutes ago, when I shivered. You didn't even notice doing it. He looked down, surprised to find his jacket on her shoulders. You're more human than you think, she said softly. The car cut through empty streets at midnight. Careful space between them. The Hollanders are convinced, he said. Thompson looked furious. Good. Then she said, your jacket smells like the cologne you wore to the Tokyo closing. You remember that? I remember everything about you. His head turned sharply, but she was already looking away. She was halfway to her door when he called out, you were right, about me being more human than I think. You make me want to be. Inside her apartment, she hung his jacket in her closet. It smelled like cedar and citrus and something uniquely him. She should return it tomorrow. She left it hanging there instead. If you've ever had a moment where pretend started to feel dangerously real, hit that like button and share this video. Tell me in the comments, do you think Ansel already loved her that night, or was it still just an act? Friday morning hit like a tsunami wrapped in a newsprint. Secret wife, how Ansel Harrington hid marriage from Wall Street. The ice architect melts. Inside the private romance nobody saw coming. Harrington's hidden heart. Meet the woman who changed everything. Elara's phone had 37 missed calls before her first coffee. James Hollander sent champagne with a note. She's remarkable. Let's finalize terms next week. The plan had worked. Too well. We need consistency, Ansel's communications director said. You can't be married Thursday and divorced by spring. The Hollander deal closes in 90 days. We need the marriage visible until then. 90 days. 3 months. 12 weeks of pretending. That afternoon, Ansel cleared his office. Just the two of them. I'm releasing you from our agreement, he said, sliding papers across his desk. Full payment regardless. You walk away clean. She stared at the document. Freedom, signed and notarized. Or we extend. 3 months. You move into the penthouse. Attend events. Separate bedrooms. Clear boundaries. Why me? Why not find someone who wants this life? Because anyone else would want it, and that would make it real in ways I can't afford. Sunday evening. Elara stood in the penthouse entryway with 2 suitcases and the distinct feeling of stepping off a cliff. Everything white, grey, steel, beautiful, sterile, like a photograph of wealth rather than somewhere someone actually lived. There's a lock on your door, Ansel said quietly. From the inside. You're safe here. I need you to know that. Safe. The word felt heavier than it should. The first week, they barely saw each other. Ships passing in a very expensive hallway. Week 2, she found him in the kitchen at midnight, staring at takeout containers like they'd personally offended him. The Dawson merger. She guessed. They want clauses that violate 3 international labor standards. Walking away costs $40 million. Then, walk away. Some things cost more than money. She cooked while he talked through the problem. Scrambled eggs, toast, the simple food his mother used to make. You keep fixing things, he said. That's what I do, she replied, and they both heard the weight behind the lightness. He appeared beside her with a dish towel. They worked in comfortable silence, shoulders occasionally brushing, and it felt more intimate than any gala performance. The blizzard hit on a Saturday in late November. No staff, no meetings, just the two of them and New York covered in white. She found Ansel scrolling through streaming services with the confusion of someone who hadn't watched television in years. Have you never had a lazy day? I don't know what that means. So she taught him. Old movies and microwave popcorn. Books read on opposite ends of the couch. Conversation that wandered from childhood fears to favorite seasons. I think I'd be a teacher, she said. High school math. You'd be incredible at that. What about you? I'd want to build things. Not companies. Furniture, maybe. Something you could touch. Small things changed gradually. He started asking before scheduling evening meetings. She rearranged his books by subject instead of color. Friday mornings, almond croissants appeared on the counter, her favorite from a bakery 12 blocks away. She left chamomile tea outside his office door with notes. Sleep is not optional. His penthouse began to feel lived in. Her books. A throw blanket. Plants he watered without being asked. One evening he said, I like having you here. Not it's convenient. Just, I like having you here. One night, she found him on the terrace at 3 a.m. Can't sleep? I'm afraid of what happens when the 3 months end. Afraid you'll have to keep performing? Afraid I'll have to stop. She should have stepped back. Should have reminded him of the terms. Instead, she said, So am I. They stood there in the cold, not touching but not separate, both realizing the most dangerous lies are the ones that become true. What do we do? He asked. I don't know. Let's just take it one day at a time, she finally said. It wasn't a solution, but it was all they had. The winter gala was supposed to be routine, another performance, another night of playing parts they'd perfected. Then Camilla Rousseau walked up to their table. French accent, venture capital empire. She touched Ansel's shoulder like she owned it. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for months. I think we'd make excellent partners. Something hot and ugly twisted in Ilara's chest. Jealousy, raw and irrational. She excused herself to the restroom and hated herself for caring. This wasn't real. He wasn't hers. When she returned, Ansel was watching the doorway, waiting for her. There's only one person I want to be talking to tonight, he said quietly, reaching for her hand under the table. The words felt too real, too dangerous. 2:30 in the morning. Ansel sat in his office with the contract spread before him like evidence at a trial. He'd asked her for one night. Somehow it had become 57 days of waking up knowing she was down the hall, of inside jokes and comfortable silences. He found her in the kitchen making chamomile tea. I trapped you, he said. I asked for one night and turned it into a life I don't know how to step out of without destroying you. You didn't trap me. I signed the contract. I can't tell anymore where the performance ends and reality begins. And I'm terrified that means I've been using you in ways the contract never covered. Ilara told herself she stayed for logical reasons. The money, the experience, the clear expiration date. But late at night, she knew those were lies she told herself to sleep. She stayed because leaving would hurt. You're in love with him, she whispered to her reflection one morning. Because loving Ansel meant she'd broken her one rule, never disappear into someone else's story again. December 15th. The Hollander acquisition closed. $40 billion. The largest deal in Wraithcore's history. You know what made the difference? James Hollander said, "That woman of yours. She reminded me that money's just paper if you don't have someone to build something meaningful with." As they drove home through streets decorated for Christmas, the silence felt like mourning. The deal was done. The original reason for their arrangement had evaporated. "We did it," Ansel said. "Yes, we did." Neither mentioned that success felt suspiciously like ending. Monday brought new complications. Jennifer from Communications presented slides about maintaining the marriage narrative. Approval ratings, media mentions, brand value. We're proposing a sustained campaign, interviews, maybe a vow renewal story. And if we could hint at future family planning. "No," Ansel said sharply. Thompson lingered after the meeting. "Your wife really sealed that deal. Makes one wonder what other arrangements might benefit from her involvement." The implication hung like poison. That evening, Ansel said the board wanted to continue the arrangement through the second quarter. Something in Ilara snapped. Another quarter, then another year, then another deal. "Where do I end and your image begin, Ansel? Am I here because you need me, or because you need a wife? Say it," she thought. "Say you need me." "The contract is fulfilled," he said, voice carefully neutral. "You don't have to stay. You're free. You're free." Translation: "You're disposable now." "Free?" she repeated. "I was terrified of exactly this, falling in love with you and being discarded the moment you didn't need me anymore. You love me? It doesn't matter. What matters is you just gave me an exit the second the deal closed." She packed while he stood in the doorway frozen. 3 months condensed into 2 suitcases. Her books, her plants, the throw blanket that had made his penthouse feel like a home. She left the ring on the kitchen counter with a note. "You asked what I was afraid of. I'm afraid of becoming invisible again. I'm afraid of loving someone who can't love me back. I'm afraid I just did both. E." The elevator doors closed on his face, still silent, still unable to say the words that might have made her stay. His phone buzzed. "Thompson, heard your wife moved out. Hope this doesn't affect your position." He'd lost Ilara, and now he might lose everything else. But standing in his empty penthouse, he realized he didn't care about any of it anymore. He cared about her. Only her. The apartment in Brooklyn was everything the penthouse wasn't. Small, affordable, hers. Ilara told herself this was freedom. 700 square feet that didn't echo with absence. A kitchen where she could cook without remembering late-night conversations over scrambled eggs. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt like living in grayscale after months of color. She returned to work at a mid-sized consulting firm. Her colleagues were kind. The work was meaningful. Nobody asked her to pretend. But every morning she woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Every evening she made dinner for one and remembered cooking for 2. The Hollander integration was proceeding flawlessly. The board had never been happier. Ansel had never been more miserable. He worked 16-hour days because the penthouse felt like a mausoleum. His assistant, the 4th in 6 weeks, tiptoed around him constantly. "Whatever's eating you, fix it," his CFO finally said. "This version of you is worse than the ice architect ever was." At night, he held the cracked blue mug she'd left behind. Her handwriting is still on a sticky note in the cookbook. Start with page 47. "Even you can't ruin pasta." He'd won everything he thought he wanted and lost the only thing that mattered. 3 weeks after leaving, Ilara sat in a coffee shop staring at a news photo of Ansel at some corporate event. He looked successful, polished, completely empty. She recognized that expression, the mask he wore when he was dying inside. A man at the next table walked over with a friendly smile. "I noticed you're working alone. Maybe you'd like some company." She felt absolutely nothing. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not available." After he left, she stared at her bare ring finger. She'd worn Ansel's ring for 3 months. The absence felt like an amputation. She missed the version of herself who debated philosophy at midnight, who felt seen down to her bones. who defended someone in a room full of sharks. Ansel hadn't just occupied space in her life. He'd shown her who she could be when someone actually looked close enough to see her. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. The marriage that never was. Inside Ansel Harrington's billion-dollar bride hoax. Someone had leaked. The timeline, the arrangement, the contract. But the article painted Ilara as a social climber who seduced her way into a billionaire's bank account. Her phone exploded. Journalists camping outside her building. Her aunt called in tears. The consulting firm's HR director scheduled a meeting with unspoken implications. Strangers called her calculating, shameless, a cautionary tale, and Ansel said nothing. At least that's what she thought, until her phone rang at 11 p.m. "Stop reading the comments," his voice said. "I'm fixing this, I promise." How? By making me look even more pathetic. By telling the truth. He'd been watching the fallout all day, watching her name dragged through digital mud while he sat protected by lawyers. At 6 p.m., he'd driven to her building. I watched her come home, head down, surrounded by photographers. I watched her hands shake as she fumbled with keys. She was being destroyed for a lie they'd built together. His phone buzzed. "Tell the truth or I will. You have 48 hours. Victoria, ready to deliver the final blow." But watching Ilara's darkened window, he realized he didn't care about his image anymore. He called an emergency press conference for Thursday morning. At 2 a.m., he sent her a text. "I'm telling them everything Thursday." At 10 a.m., "You deserve better than being called a liar while I hide. Loving you was the only real thing I've ever done." 3 minutes later, his phone rang. "You'll lose everything," she said through tears. "I already lost everything when you walked out that door. If you're telling the truth, I'm telling it to you. We started this together. We will end it together. If you've ever watched someone you care about pay the price for your silence, you know this moment. Tap subscribe and tell me in the comments, should he expose the whole truth, even if it ruins his perfect image?" Thursday morning, 10 a.m. The St. Regis ballroom was packed with journalists expecting corporate damage control. Instead, Ansel walked to the podium alone, no legal team, no prepared corporate statement, and told the truth. "3 months ago, I asked my executive assistant to pretend to be my wife. I offered her money. I told her it was for one night. Then I kept asking for more because I was too afraid to admit I needed her for reasons that had nothing to do with business." The room went silent. Every article calling Ilara a social climber, a manipulator. Those are lies. I begged her to enter my life, and when she fell in love with me, I was too broken to say it back. I'm here because the woman I love is being destroyed for my cowardice. That ends today. After the press conference, he drove to Brooklyn, climbed 4 flights because the elevator was broken. Ilara opened the door in jeans and an old sweater, eyes red. His face was frozen on her laptop screen behind her. "You actually did it," she said. 3 board members have called for my resignation. Stock dropped 6%. Why? You could have denied everything. Because controlling the narrative is what got us here. He stood in her doorway, offering nothing but himself. "Can I come in?" She stepped back. "I stood in front of 200 journalists and told them I was the architect of every lie," he said. "I told them falling in love with you was the only authentic thing I've done in 15 years. Tears streamed down her face. "Do you know how hard I tried not to love you? I had rules, boundaries. Then you'd memorize my aunt's birthday or cook the breakfast my mother used to make, and I'd feel myself slipping." She moved to the window. "I fell in love in the small moments. How you listened like my ideas mattered. The time you rescheduled a board meeting because I wanted to see the first snow in Central Park. I remember everything," she continued. "That's the problem. When you said I was free, all I heard was that I'd become disposable. I gave you an exit because I was terrified you'd stay out of obligation," he said. "It was the worst decision I've ever made. I don't want you in my story," he said quietly. "I want us to write a new one together." He handed her a folded paper, his handwriting. 1. Therapy twice weekly, 6 months minimum. 2. Elara's career is completely separate from Wraith Core. 3. Real dating, no performance. 4. Either person can walk away anytime. 5. Truth always, even when uncomfortable. 6. No living together until both are certain this is real. You wrote terms for dating me? Old habits. But no compensation, no penalties, just conditions for trying. I have conditions too, she said. You're my equal or you're nothing. When you're scared, you talk instead of deciding for both of us. And I keep this apartment. Agreed. To everything. She took his hands. I love you, but show me. Over time. With actions, he pulled her close, forehead against hers. I can do that, he whispered. No performance, no audience, just two people choosing each other with the truth. 18 months later, change didn't arrive in grand transformations. It arrived in ordinary moments that accumulated like snowfall, barely noticeable until the entire landscape had shifted. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Ansel sat in Dr. Calloway's office learning. To say I'm afraid instead of I've analyzed the situation. His first breakthrough came 6 weeks in. She asked him to describe a moment of genuine happiness. He described a Saturday morning, snow outside, Elara reading on the couch, microwave popcorn burning because neither was paying attention, both laughing about nothing. That's happiness, Dr. Calloway said. Notice it has nothing to do with profit margins. Elara joined a non-profit focused on economic development. They dated like normal people. Coffee on Saturday mornings, long walks through neighborhoods they'd never explored, arguments about whose turn it was to choose the movie. Their first real fight happened 3 months in. He rescheduled dinner with her aunt without asking. She called him controlling. He got defensive. Then they both stopped, breathed, started over with honesty instead of armor. They learned that love wasn't about never hurting each other. It was about what you did after, whether you retreated behind walls or reached across with open hands. Spring arrived like a promise finally kept. The rooftop garden Ansel had commissioned opened on a Thursday evening, a green space in Brooklyn, free to the community, filled with plants Elara had helped select. She found him waiting among cherry blossoms as sunset painted everything gold. The first time I asked you to be my wife, I was asking you to solve a problem, he said, voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. This time, I'm asking you to build a life with me, no contracts, no timelines, no exit strategies, just us choosing each other every day. Will you marry me, for real this time? She looked at him, this man who'd learned to cry in therapy, who now asked before deciding, who'd built a garden in her aunt's neighborhood because she'd mentioned once that green spaces saved her childhood. Yes, but we keep doing the work. Therapy, honesty, choosing each other even when it's inconvenient. She kissed him then, soft and certain, tasting like choice instead of obligation. They married on a Saturday in September in the rooftop garden. 40 people who actually knew them. No press, no board members, just her aunt crying happy tears and his mother whispering, "She makes you real." Their vows weren't crafted by PR teams. Ansel, I promise to choose truth over image, honesty over comfort, us over everything. And when I fail, I promise to stay in the room instead of retreating. Elara, I promise to build my life with you, not around you. And I promise to never let you forget you're worthy of love. Not because of what you've built, but because of who you are. When they kissed, it felt nothing like the Metropolitan Museum performance. It felt like arriving somewhere they'd been searching for their entire lives. What started as one desperate night became a lifetime of conscious choice. Sometimes the most honest thing you'll ever do starts with a lie that teaches you how to stop pretending. Tell me in the comments, what did you learn from Ansel and Elara's story? Did a temporary situation ever become something real in your life? If this story touched you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Mr. Duskmore's Stories. Because the best love stories aren't about perfect people. They're about flawed, frightened people choosing each other, again and again, until the choosing itself becomes a love story. This is Mr. Duskmore reminding you, The most dangerous lies aren't the ones we tell others. They're the ones we tell ourselves about who we deserve to be.